say, a 150-year event, and it suddenly becomes a 50-year event. And that's sort of what's happening in many places.
The atmosphere now in general has about 7% more moisture in it than it did back in, say, the 70s. There's very clear evidence that all across the United States, especially in the eastern half of the country, we've seen a big uptick. I mean, I'm talking 30, 40, 50% increase in the frequency of heavy precipitation events. This is very directly connected to climate change. It's totally expected, and it's certainly playing out in real time right before our very eyes.
So I grew up in a neighborhood called Mireland in Houston, and when I was there, Mireland never flooded. Now it floods all the time. And I went on Zillow, and I was looking at houses, and I found this beautiful house. It's 5,000 square feet. It's located in a nice neighborhood, big schools, and it's selling for $86 a square foot. It has a pool, and it's really a beautiful house. And if you say, wow, why is it so cheap? It's because it's flooded twice. And so no one wants to buy this. No one wants to buy a house that's going to flood.
And the example I have in mind is Hurricane Harvey in 2017. And 3 independent groups who did not know about each other working on this, one of which was me, estimated that the risk of that level of rainfall in Harris County had more or less tripled between 1970 and 2017 when the event occurred.
And if you'll notice, it says, would be a great candidate to lift. So I'll talk about that in a second.
It's going to rain harder on average, so you're going to see more type of rainfall events capable of causing extreme flooding.
A 500-year flooding event, which are, of course, becoming more and more frequent. We've got climate change as a part of that, but also old infrastructure as well.
As far back as 1999, the feds warned that the dam needed to increase its capacity to prevent a significant flood overcoming destruction.
We have a lot of things that we've built that may be vulnerable to a gradual change, pushing them over a threshold and causing an abrupt issue for us.
Climate change is this constant pressure on our society, affecting millions of little decisions, affecting our lives in ways of way, each one of them making us a little bit poorer than we would otherwise have to be. You know, if you live in the Gulf Coast, you're going to have to run your air conditioner more. You're going to have to pay for flood infrastructure. You're going to have to pay to raise houses off the ground for new construction. There's millions of these little costs that are going to be pushed into all of our lives.
You know, the average storm we might encounter every 10 years or so isn't changing very much, but the 100-year event is becoming noticeably, in many places, noticeably more risky.
A heavy rainfall event that would have occurred about once every 100 years on average in a world without human influence is now occurring about once every 20 years. And if we continue running at 2 degrees of global warming from pre-industrial, that same precipitation event will be occurring about once every 5 years.
This is not any longer a problem about the future, it's a problem about now.
The entire swath of states from North Dakota to Michigan had the wettest year on record in 2019, and we've had just amazing amounts of flooding.
Water vapor is energy. Think of it as energy. When that water vapor condenses into liquid, which happens in the cloud, that latent energy is released into the atmosphere, so that provides even more energy for the storm to work with. So when it does rain,
Good evening. Good evening and good evening. Welcome to Saginaw Valley State University. On behalf of our president, Dr. George Grant, who could not be with us this evening, I bring you greetings from him. He wanted me to let you know that we are so proud and very grateful and very thankful that you are here on our campus and that you are here to participate in this wonderful lecture that we're going to have this evening. Diversity brings strength for climate action. I also would like to take this opportunity to thank the Dean of the College of Science, Engineering, and Technology. I do believe that Andrew Chubbs is here. Andrew, if you could stand and wave, we appreciate and give him a yes. Thank you so much. This is truly a team effort. And we also have our provost, Dr. Deborah Huntley, who's here this evening. Dr. Huntley, please stand. And in a few minutes, I'll tell you why it's important that we recognize these people. I do believe that our General Counsel, Ellen Crane, also is here. Ellen, thank you very much. And then we also have members of the Stick Club. Some are here at Saginaw Valley and some are in the region. I want you to stand. I know you have your beautiful shirts on. And Pat, where's my shirt? But please stand, all of the Stick Club members that are part. Thank you. Thank you for being here. And we have so many other people who are here from the region, to help us celebrate this great program that we're going to have this evening. I also have to give special thanks to my new friend, Pat Race. Now, many of you know Pat, but I have had the privilege in the last several months to get to know Pat. And we survived. We survived. Pat, where are you? This is the, this is what I would say, this is the brain behind this activity. This is the gentleman that made sure that I was on task. And he would send these emails to me morning, afternoon, evening, and what I appreciate about Pat is that his heart is in the right place. And he wants to do, yes, let's give him a nice yes. Thank you, Pat. So Pat is, but before Pat, I just thought of someone else. Sorry about that. We have the mayor of Saginaw here, Brenda Moore. Please stand. We thank you so much. And this is the beauty of diversity. It brings us all together for a common cause. If you're in Bay City, if you're in Midland, if you're in Saginaw, Frankenmuth, or wherever you are, if you are young students, if you are senior citizens or veterans, we welcome you here to Saginaw Valley State University. Now I'm going to have Pat, if he would just, give a few remarks, Pat, because we have a wonderful program planned. But tell us how all of this kind of came together and whatever thoughts that you would like to share with us. Pat Race, let's give it up for him.
The first thing I like to do is have the people in the back row raise their hand if they can hear me. Okay, good. Now, there are two tasks that I have tonight, one of which is to go through the program. That'll take me about a minute and a half. And then the second is to set the context for what we're going to do. So you may have gotten this, you may not have paid too much attention to it, but just to let you know that when I am done speaking, Mary McCormick will introduce our first major speaker, Angela And then when she is done, then Andy, another student from Saginaw Valley, will introduce Bill McKibben. When Bill is done, we will then have a fireside chat where Emma Abadabro, who is the leader of the Saginaw Valley Climate Stick Club, and I will interrogate Bill and Angela in a fireside chat. So my first task is done, and the second one, most people who know me think that I start every story with, I was born in September of, and I won't do that for you, okay? But what I will do is, to organize my introduction, I have 3 quotes that I'm going to read, and then there will be perhaps 7 sentences after that, and then Mary will come up here. So the first quote is, "May you live in interesting times." And this is a quote theoretically from Chinese, but there's no sources, and usually it comes from the English. And I don't know about you, but I think there's too much interesting in our times right now. So keep that in mind as we move on to the second quote, which is basically something Winston Churchill said. "Americans will always do the right thing only after they have tried everything else." And the third quote comes from an article that was in the Bay City Times on Sunday. As I was trying to keep this short, I was struggling with what I would do, and then this man wrote the setups. His name is David Von Dre of the Washington Post, and here's what he wrote. "When our mental bandwidth is packed with generalized gloom, there is the crisis of climate, the crisis of democracy, the crisis of gun violence, the crisis of water," and he went on for 4 other crises, including the crisis of a woman's right to choose. So where is the American public today? Well, on the crisis of democracy, 72% of Democrats, 60% of independents, and 49% of Republicans want to reduce big money in politics. On gerrymandering, fully transparent redistricting gets 78% from Democrats, 74% from Republicans. Public input on proposed maps gets 68% from Democrats and 63% from Republicans. Ban lobbyists from participating, 68% from Democrats, 64% from Republicans. If we move on to women's reproductive health, 69% of U.S. adults are dissatisfied with the abortion bans, and 46% of Americans are dissatisfied and want less strict laws. If we move on to gun violence, background checks get 87%. Red flag laws are not 74%. Semi-automatic weapon bans are 55%. All of those are problems that will be changed within the 5 years in the future because of the mobilization of people like was seen in Wisconsin last week and in Kansas a few months ago. There is no question that the political culture of the U.S. is going to change dramatically in the next 3 to 5 years. And that's good news for all of us. Redistricting and federal laws will come that make many good things happen. Complete government support for all health needs of women, including areas of reproduction, better than Roe. Not only will common sense laws determine who gets guns, all automatic and semi-automatic guns will be banned, and bans will be enforced about making your own guns with 3D printing. Those crises can all be solved by dramatic action on our federal and state governments. Unfortunately, this is not true for the climate issue. The climate issue 5 years from now will still require a lot of hard work from all of us, even if those other things come to pass. And of course, they will be helped by our work on the climate change. So it's not true because the climate issue is such a complex issue. Much progress will come, but it cannot be fast enough. The story of our future is what our 2 guest speakers will talk about. They will inform you from their knowledge of what's going on about how you can make your efforts against the climate crisis that faces us happen. So with that, I would like to bring Mary McCormick up, and she will introduce Angela. Short enough? Short enough?
Hi, everyone. I'm Mary. Angela Artis is the Michigan State Director for Next Gen America. She helps with encouraging youth activism and voting right here in Michigan, and she does this by promoting community and involvement through organizations that we have here. It is an honor to have her tonight, so please welcome Angela Artis.
Hello. How is everyone doing this evening? I would like to start off with, I am honored to be here. I am honored to be the opening act for Bill McKibben. I hope that it goes well. And if it doesn't, we have a great closer, right? So thank you very much for being here. Now, my expertise lies in the area of organizing and mobilization, which is exactly what we need to fight this. You can't hear? Is it, let's see. Okay, is this any better? All right, sorry about that. So mobilization is what we're going to need to be able to fight this climate crisis. It's not going to be done by sitting in chairs and coming to things like this. It's wonderful and it's needed so people can get the message out, but we're going to have to hit the streets if we want to see action and we want to see change. The video you were watching earlier of Ellicott City, Maryland, I used to live 3 miles from where that flood happened, and I remember when the flood happened the first time, and they said it was once in 100 years flood, and when it happened 2 years later, it was scary, because that was one of those moments where you have that realization that everything we've been talking about is not just real, but it's here and it's now. But we have Bill McKibben to tell you much, much more about that, who is much better at it than I am. I'm going to talk to you about Next Gen America. At least that's what I'm going to start with. If this works. Let's try this again. Aha! So who is Next Gen America? Has anyone here heard of Next Gen America? All right! Go Saginaw! All right, so for those of you who didn't raise your hands, please pay attention. For those of you who did, I don't know, check your phone, something. So who we are is we are the largest youth mobilization political group in the country. Our focus is 18 to 35-year-olds. We are largely on college campuses. We have been here at Saginaw Valley University in the past. We will hopefully be here again, especially now that I've been here. And I got some friends. All right. But what we do is we talk to youth, and we talk to youth in an authentic way. And one of the cool things about us is we did start with climate. That is how it was actually Next Gen Climate Action. And we changed over the years because the more and more we are engaging youth on the climate, it's not just the climate. The world is on fire. The world is on fire for our reproductive rights. The world is on fire for our voting rights. The world is on fire, and youth want to be involved. And if you speak to youth, one, with youth, and two, in an authentic way where you're not pandering or you are not emphasizing people's wants and needs, people will take action. When you empower people, people will come together. And here's where we are right now. We actually are not just in these states, we are now also in the great state of Virginia, where we've seen some great movement there, and I'm excited to see what our state director is going to do. And we are going to continue to grow. But one of the things we're doing here in Michigan is we're going deeper and deeper because we want to make change. And so we are no longer just looking at elections. Historically, we have come in, we have done an election, we have kicked butt and taken names on college campuses and the areas surrounding college campuses, and then we've left and come back 2 years later. This year, we are working in the Michigan legislature on putting together bills for Promote the Vote, which passed in 2022. We are also looking at democracy issues like expansion of voting rights to those under the age of 18 in school board elections, changing our civics education so that it's active, so that you know what your county clerk does, so you know how to make a voting plan, so you know the importance of your vote, not just that we have 3 branches of government. So this is just kind of a lot of words to say that we've done a lot of things that when you increase the youth vote, politicians listen. At the very end of the day, everybody knows that the #1 goal of any politician, no matter what they tell you, is re-election. And when youth turn out, they know that they need you for re-election. So we have been able to get things passed and moving in Arizona, in Michigan, federally in the Inflation Reduction Act. This is the work that we do. Next Gen America is the biggest organization that is mobilizing youth in this country. There are other organizations out there. We partner with them here in Michigan, and we partner with them around the country, and we're going to continue to do that because this is the largest and most diverse generation in the history of our country, and it is time that we took action. All right, so what do we do, though? Like, how do we do it? Like, do I just sit around, do I talk? Do I, I don't know, go for coffee? I do. I go for a lot of coffee. So I work with the on-the-ground team in the state. And just to give a little shout out for a second, in the front row, we have our 2022 organizing director for the state of Michigan, Ms. Rachel Deal. Could you please raise your hand? Rachel was over 18 campuses with many organizers and regional organizing directors and made sure that the vote got out in Michigan. And give a little preview, we won the lotto in the state. We got the best organizing director in the country here. And I think that shows in the fact that we had the highest youth voter turnout in the country. But that's what we do. We go into the community, we go into the colleges. So where are we at? We're at farmers markets because this generation wants food that wasn't processed. So they're going to go farm to table. We are going to college campuses because people are getting educated. But we're also going into neighborhoods that have high youth populations. We worked this year, we really expanded our program. We worked with returning citizens to make sure that they understood that after incarceration, they have the right to vote. And they have the right to make sure that their voices are heard. We talked with youth who were aging out of the foster care system to make sure that they know that they were not going to be alone and that they did have the right to vote and they did have the right to stand up and say that things need to change. Because of anyone who's turning 18 in this country who knows that the system is broken, it's those that are aging out of foster care. And we worked with them this year and we will continue those relationships. So that's what we're doing on the ground. Right now, what we're doing is a lot of partner work with organizations. Like I said, we're working on bills. We're working on changing the landscape of when you can vote, how you can vote. Promote the Vote, if anyone hasn't been looking into it, which this is a room of people that I know are probably very familiar with Promote the Vote, but pre-registration, knowing that you will be pre-registered to vote, and when you turn 18, you don't have to find some secret way. In Texas, to register someone to vote, you have got to be deputized. Not only do you have to be deputized, but you have to be deputized in every single county you want to do it in. So if I want to do it in this county, I got to go to deputized. I want to go to the next county, I got to go get deputized there. In Michigan, when we turn 18, we're going to vote, and you know what that means? This progressive change that we've seen in our state is going to continue to grow because this large, diverse population wants to see change. But we are in a modern age, and while face-to-face organizing is the most effective organizing to get someone out and get someone invested, we understand that that's not the only way that people engage in politics anymore. So we have an amazing national program that runs texting, that runs digital ads, that tells the story. We have social media influencer program. We do campaigns like right now, we're gonna be gearing up for some Green Week stuff. We have Hot Girls Vote. We even do dating app organizing. What's your idea? This is why I can't move places. This is why I'm bad. But the dating app organizing is really hilarious. It's like, what's your idea of a perfect date? You and I going to vote, and then door knocking to get others out. That's my idea of a perfect date. So, and that is all done by our national team, and it's pretty exciting. And we also do cool stuff, but my team gets to do really cool, fun stuff. See that dinosaur costume? Yeah, you just hang out on campus. You walk around with these. You've got like a rickshaw here saying vote, get out, be a voter, do what you need to do. This year, 2022 in Lansing, if anyone saw a bunch of Teletubbies running around doing reverse trick-or-treating, that was Next Gen America. Thank you very much. We are very lucky that we have amazing, wonderful people who help support our organization, who understand the need to be creative. You got to be creative because people are so inundated with so much these days that I might walk past the person with a flyer. I might walk past the person who is, even just handing out candy. But if you get a Teletubby in my face, I'm going to stop and see what you're doing because I think I might have to call someone. And you do, to tell them to vote. All right, and this is more, we are always on college campuses. We are always moving in that direction because young people, there's a lot of misinformation that goes around with like how you vote, where you vote, especially if you're a college student because you don't see yourself as a permanent resident. But if you're gonna be here for 4 years, if you're a freshman on day one, your entire time will be that time. So you should be voting where you live. And I know it's hard sometimes because you still think, but I live at home, that's where my mom is. And I am not 18, and where my mom is always home, but we do not have the same address anymore. All right, so 2020, we reached out to more than 10.5 million people. Here in the state, in 2 months, we reached out to 10,000 people face-to-face, which we had a team that hit the ground. I was a very lucky state director in 2022. But looking at that, Next Gen America, 73% of our people turn out to vote. Now, that's not saying that 73% of youth, but if we talk to you, there is a 73% chance that you are going to vote because we are relentless. I'm letting you know that because you have to be, because what's at stake is that important. And that's what we tell people when they get that fatigue, because especially living in a state like Michigan, you get voting fatigue, and we understand that. But we have early voting. So the second you tell me you voted, you don't have to hear from me anymore, except for maybe if you want to come volunteer and, hang out in a dinosaur costume. All right, so this is just kind of like the little fun stats behind it. If you take a look at it, what I find really interesting is in 1992, Youth Vote was excited about Bill Clinton. So you see a lot of youth voting. In 2008, everybody was excited about Barack Obama. So you see youth voting. But I don't really think you can say in 2020, Biden really got the youth excited. But the youth were engaged because of organizations like Next Gen America. And the youth turned out because they knew they needed to be there because that's how important it is. All right, and this is just kind of looking at it. So if you look at this is just looking at a few seats that were very close, and the people who had youth support won, like here in Michigan, Gary Peters, and yep. But if you didn't have youth support, like say a Sarah Gideon there, you didn't win. So what that says is, as of 2020, you might not need us to win, but you're not going to win without us. So we're on that line. We're on a very fine line right now, where right now, if you take action, if you start joining in with your friends and your family and your nieces, your nephews, your cousins, we can change that so that 18 to 35 is paid attention to, that the wants and desires the needs of this generation is taken seriously by politicians. All right. And again, this is just saying again that 73% of our people vote as compared to 59.5% of the general community. Excited by that. 2022 nationally, you know, we're moving, we're changing, we're in our key states. Like I said, we are now up to 9 states, so we've got an update from that. But we're putting the tools in people's hands, and we're focusing on clean energy, and we're focusing on reproductive rights, and we're focusing on making a change. And again, looking at Michigan, we won the game. See that 37%? 37% of, we won the highest youth voter turnout in the country. If you had told me that 10 years ago, as we were going through the crises, I would not have believed you, because it was a desolate time in Michigan. But one thing that happened with all that happened in Michigan a decade ago is we started training youth to be organizers. Youth saw their communities falling apart. They saw their cities poisoned, and they saw nothing happening to the people that did it. And instead of feeling despair, they took that pain and they organized, and they learned how to change this state, and we are looking at the results of it right now. And again, this is because, you know, I want to show, like, this is real. Like, we are changing, we are growing. The youth vote is increasing. This is where it applies to our room here today. The two groups that are growing is 18 to 29 and 65 plus. So if these two groups can get on the same page, like the people we see in this room right now, we win. We win, we make change. We get policies that are going to protect our planet, that are going to protect our bodies, that are going to protect our right to vote. But it depends on us joining together. So can everyone in this room here today tell me that they will reach out to one person sitting in this audience and introduce themselves to someone who is not in your age demographic? So if you are below the age of, let's say, 40 and below, you are going to talk to someone above the age of 40 and vice versa. Will everyone in this room commit to me that before you walk out those doors, you're going to say hi to someone you don't know, you're going to tell them your name, and you're going to tell them why you're here? Yeah. Can you do that? Yeah. I don't know. That did not sound enthusiastic. All right. All right. And I'm going to be quizzing you at the door. Maybe. All right. And now we're just moving on to, like, why climate justice. And, you know, this is all things you know. The people who are going to feel what's happening in the climate right now are the youth. That's why they have watched their world change. And it is time. But one thing that this slide, I think, could be improved on is climate justice is not just about the environment. Climate justice is economic justice. Climate justice is racial justice. Because if you look at who are the areas that are getting poisoned by companies, poisoned by politicians, is it where the mansions are? Are they having problems with lead? No. Who's getting poisoned? Who are losing their homes? And that is why climate justice is that overarching umbrella that can bring everyone together if we decide to make a change. All right, so, and again, this is going through some of the programs that have been able to pass, and historic investment in clean energy. But one of the things we need to remember is we need to continue to work, because what we have seen is the wrong people get in office, they can undo everything on this screen. So if you are not organizing, if you are not talking to your neighbors, if you are not talking to, talk to your civic group, talk to your church group, talk to your book club. You need to be out there, because every single thing up here can be undone with a swipe of a pen with the wrong person. Right, and then just talking about climate justice in Michigan, one of the things that is amazing, and I'm gonna move here, is Now we put up here the IRA, the Biden-Harris Investment in American Agenda, Delivering for Michigan, not for Biden. The reason that we are delivering for Michigan is because Michigan turned out. That is why we have this investment. If we did not turn out, and if we did not have the right people in Washington and in Lansing, we would not be getting this investment from the IRA. And if we do not continue to turn out, we will see that money go away. So again, look at all of this. This is going to be jobs. This is going to be you having a home where you feel good and safe to raise a family. Or you looking at your children and your grandchildren and feeling good about what you are leaving for them. That's what this represents. But we also know that while all this is inspiring, we have a lot of anxiety about it. Because again, you're watching a world on fire. So what can you do? And just like I was saying, community will help with your mental health. Your vote doesn't do everything. We are going to be around. Next Gen America is on college campuses. We are in your communities. And while you're in high school and you're in the Climate Stick Club, that is amazing work. When you get to college, come talk to us. When you are in high school still with the Climate Stick Club, come talk to us. We are ready to partner with you, and we are ready to help you grow and start to make change where you live now. Small victories are what are the seeds for great change. All right, so, but what can I do today? Today, if you didn't sign our sheet when you came in, please make sure you sign it before you leave. Get involved. We are going to be doing Green Week calling, so you can go to our website and you can sign up for a shift to call on Green Week, where we are going to be calling our legislators, telling them to invest in green energy, to invest in the things that are going to save our planet. And I really implore you to register to vote. And can I say, not just registering, but when the elections come up, now this year in Michigan, we don't have a governor's race, we don't have a Senate race, we don't have any of that. But your local, maybe your clerk, maybe your mayor, maybe your council are up. And those are the people that affect your life on a daily basis. Do you want a composting program in your community? The governor is not going to decide if your small town has a composting program, but the people on your council will. So you need to find out who they are and you need to vote. And then we also partner in the state. These are just a couple of our partners: League of Conservation Voters, Voters Not Politicians, Campus Vote Project, because this is too much work to be done alone. So heading into 2024, we're going to be organizing across Michigan. And again, come talk to me, come talk to Zach that was out front, and we'll get you involved. And that's not just for our youth voters, because we have volunteers that run the whole gambit of age. Because everyone's important and we need to work together. So like I said, before you leave, introduce yourself to someone who is not in your age demographic and talk to them about why you're here. And if you want to get involved in Next Gen America, we have a spot for you. All right? So I'd like to thank you so much for giving me this time up here. And I appreciate you, and I look forward to talking with some of you later. Thank you.
Well, that was wonderful to hear. I don't know about you guys, but I am extremely inspired to get out there now and start helping and motivating for the fight for climate change. I am Andy Clark. I'm a first-year biochemistry student here. I use they, them pronouns, and I am the treasurer of the Climate Stick Club here on campus, which is really exciting and has been a great part of my freshman year. Now, I have the great honor tonight of getting to introduce Mr. Bill McKibben. There is some information about him in your program, and it was really hard to find some things to say about him, but I did kind of settle on a few things that I really want to point out. Mr. Bill McKibben is a renowned author, a journalist, and helped to found 350.org, and he is here today representing the group that he founded, Third Act. He was awarded the Gandhi Peace Award, the Right Livelihood Award, and in 2010, he was called the nation's leading environmentalist by the Boston Globe.
What a pleasure. What a great pleasure to get to be here and to get to follow Angie. Thank you for your work and for that presentation. And what a pleasure to be here with you all. Now, I confess, I get asked to talk at a lot of places, and generally I can't come to them all. But I had somehow in my life never been to Saginaw, Michigan. So when they asked, and Madam Mayor, I will tell you, the main thing that I knew about Saginaw, Michigan before I got here was that it's where Stevie Wonder had come from. And I will say that is enough for any town. I mean, if you had stopped right there, that would have you produced one of the, on the very short list of the very great men who ever lived in this country. But now I know that there is an awful lot more going on here, and what a pleasure to have been here, and especially at this institution, which is big and beautiful and well-constructed and filled with interesting people. I got to spend part of the afternoon with the Lifelong Learning Institute, which was great, and I got to meet a ton of the regular students, which was just as much fun, and just people doing remarkable things. So very, very good day to be a cardinal, if only for a little while. So thank you for having me. Now I regret to inform you that I'm not going to be as technologically advanced as Angela. You know, people of a certain age probably shouldn't be using technology very much. But as it happens, I have a kind of hyper-advanced, I call it virtual PowerPoint. And if it works correctly, the pictures will kind of appear in your mind as I am talking. So let us see if it works or not, okay? Because what I really want to talk about, I could talk about a lot of things, and I'll try to talk a little bit about sort of basic questions around climate change and things at some point in our fireside chat, if not before. But I was asked to talk about diversity bringing strength to climate action, and so that's really what I do want to talk about. As a small bit of background, I did, in fact, write the first book about climate change back when one of the odd things about old people is that once upon a time we weren't. And when I was in my 20s, I wrote the first book about what we now call climate change, what we then called the greenhouse effect. And so that sort of set my life's work. I was about as early into as it was literally possible to be, and it's where I've spent my whole life. But at a certain point, and it took me too long to figure this out, 10 or 15 years, I sort of began to realize that writing more books wouldn't move the needle. I kept writing books because that's how I make my living, and that's what I like to do. But I also started to switch what I did. What I'd figured out was that because I'm a writer and an academic, I sort of thought of this in terms of an argument. And when you're trying to win an argument, it's important to pile up as much evidence and data and whatever as you possibly can. And I think our theory is, well, once we've won the argument, then of course our leaders will do the right thing, because why wouldn't they? It took me a while to figure out that we had won the argument, but we were still losing the climate fight, because the fight wasn't actually about data and reason and evidence. The fight was about what fights are normally about, which is money and power. And the other side in this fight, the fossil fuel industry, had so much money and hence so much political power that it did not matter if losing the argument was not preventing them from rolling forward with their business model, even as the poles melted and the sea began to rise and on and on and on. So I decided that we better assemble some power ourselves. And lacking billions of dollars, the only other way to do that is to start trying to build movements, to try and compete in the currency of movements, creativity and passion and spirit, and occasionally the willingness to spend one's body perhaps and go to jail. So we started organizing, not that we really knew what we were doing. I wasn't trained for this the way Angie was, and really nobody's that trained for it. We don't have like a West Point for building nonviolent movements, you know? So you sort of make it up as you go along. The we, in this case, was myself and 7 college students at the little tiny college in rural Vermont where I hang out. And we formed this thing that we called 350.org, took its name from what the scientists said was the most carbon you could safely have in the atmosphere, 350 parts per million. A number, sadly, we're way north of now, or about 424 as of this morning. That's why the Arctic melts, and it's why the oceans rise. But we took that as our name because we wanted to organize around the globe, and we figured that Arabic numerals would cross those diverse linguistic boundaries more easily than English words, you know. As I say, we really didn't know what we were doing, but there were 7 students, and there are 7 continents, so each one took one, and the guy who took the Antarctic also had to take the internet, and we set out to find other people like ourselves around the world. Now, there's not someplace everywhere in the world someone who calls themselves an environmentalist, but there's someone everywhere who cares about public health, or about women's rights, or about war and peace, or about development, about all the things we will not have if we keep running the temperature higher and higher until we're just in a point of constant crisis. And those were our allies. This was about 2008. And we asked them to organize anything. We just told them a date in the fall of 2009 and said, organize something here to bring attention to climate change wherever you are. I'm a Methodist Sunday school teacher, so the Methodist sacrament is pretty much the potluck supper, you know, and this was pretty much just the potluck supper approach. Here's the date, and you figure out what to do, you know. And people responded all over the world when we had that day of action. Well, let me tell you about the week of it, because it really brings this diversity question right to the fore. We're getting ready to have this big day of action. We told everybody to do their thing on a Saturday. And on Thursday, we were sitting around our office, and the satellite phone rang. And it was our leader in Ethiopia, who, like most of us, was a she, and like a surprising number of us was 17 years old, and she was in tears on the phone. And she said, they've taken away our permit for Saturday, but we're going to try and do this today before they can stop us, which was a brave thing to do. It's not the nicest government in the world, but that wasn't why she was crying. She kept saying, we wanted to do this the same day as everybody else. We wanted to do it same time. We want to be part of the whole thing. We hope we're not spoiling it. We're really sorry. And we have 10,000 young people out in the street right now chanting 350 in Addis Ababa. And I was like, wow, do not worry about the date. That's not a problem. Good work. What we need from you, and remember, this, I'm going to tell you a story because it's real, and I want you to understand, always be understanding what the world is like. I said, we need a picture of that so that we can show it to reporters all over the world and get them excited and stuff. And she says, well, the internet's not really working today here in Ethiopia. And I was like, and so I looked up on my computer to see if there was a Western hotel in Addis Ababa, and there was one, the Intercontinental. I said, I know that there's got to be internet in the lobby there in the Intercontinental. Go there walk in and use it and send us a picture. I got a call back about 20 minutes later. She's like, I'm at the Intercontinental, but they won't let me in. They don't let, they don't let locals. They don't really let black people into the Intercontinental. I was like, okay, this is getting way too real here. And I said, look around. I'm sorry. I said, look around and see if you can't find some nice white lady who's walking in the hotel, and hand her your phone and tell her to press the button when she gets inside. And that's just what she did. And we got the picture 20 minutes later, and it was beautiful. 10,000 kids out, banners and things all in the street in Addis Ababa, and we sent it around the world, and it went everywhere, and it was one of the things that really helped spark that weekend. But just think for a minute about all the kinds of things that are wrapped up in that one little story about privilege and about ability to connect with the rest of the world and about who's good organizers and on and on and on. Well, it was a good omen for us because over that weekend there were 5,100 demonstrations in 181 countries. CNN called it the most widespread day of political activity in the planet's history. And there was one right here in Saginaw, and I'm really grateful to Pat for that and for much else. He's a tremendous organizer, as many of you know. But we told everybody to upload pictures of those demonstrations as they were happening. Facebook and Twitter weren't really things yet, but there was our killer app was something called Flickr that let you upload pictures. So, and my job was to take those pictures. They were coming in and send them out all over the place again and things. And they were coming in 20 or 30 a minute there for a while, really for most of the weekend. And it was amazing watching them because it taught me, continued to teach me a powerful lesson that the story from Ethiopia had begun to teach me. I had always been told that environmentalists were rich white people. And if you did not know where your next meal was coming from, you wouldn't be an environmentalist because you'd have more important things on your mind and on and on and on. It took about 20 minutes of watching those pictures come in to recognize that almost everybody we were working with around the world was poor and black and brown and Asian and young. Because that's what almost all the world is, you know. And what do you know? Exactly as interested in the future as I was, maybe even more so, because the future bears down hard on you if you're in some of those places. The iron law of climate change is the less you did to cause it, the sooner and the harder you get hit. Look, for instance, at what happened in Pakistan last fall. One of the properties of a warmer air is that it can hold more water vapor, which allows us to have floods on a scale we've never seen before. Well, the biggest of them all was what happened in August and September in Pakistan last year. It was the biggest flood since Noah. Just started raining and didn't stop for day after weeks. There were towns in the provinces of Sindh and Balochistan that got 800% of their annual rainfall in the course of 3 weeks. Okay? So there's no place on earth that can cope with that. People had lived, most houses over there are of mud construction, which works great. People have lived happily in them for a long time. But if it rains, it pours nonstop, people's houses just melted around them. By the time it was all done, 33 million people had been displaced. That's the entire population from Boston down to Baltimore having to leave their homes, The 200 million people who live in Pakistan have put way less than 1% of the carbon that's currently in the atmosphere. The 300 million people who live in this country have put about 25% of all the CO2 in the atmosphere. Not Pakistan's fault, not Sudan and Somalia's fault that they've gone the last 5 rainy seasons without any rain. It's because the temperature now in the surrounding oceans is so high that it's changed the way that weather works in that part of the world, and the rain is no longer falling on those places. And there are now tens of millions of people dependent at best on a little food aid from the UN to somehow get them through the day. The average Sudanese has produced 1/500th as much carbon in their lifetime as the average American, so not their fault. And that confers, obviously, an obligation on all of us to do the right thing. But it also confers real moral power on the rest of the world to demand that we do the right thing. And that diversity, when we can bring it together in the form of organizing the whole globe, is a very special thing when it happens. And it happened that day, and it's happened some days since. We think we've organized around 20,000 demonstrations in every country on earth except North Korea in the years since. And it's been beautiful, beautiful to watch. And the leadership comes always from frontline communities, the places that are most vulnerable. Think about the incredible environmental leadership that the people of Flint have shown in this state, for instance, okay? And the leadership comes always everywhere around the world from indigenous communities. Think about the leadership that indigenous communities in the upper Midwest have shown in the fights over Line 5 and Line 3 pipelines, you know? Because, as you would expect, people's lives are on the line. That concentrates the mind, you know? It turns you into a fighter if you were not one before, because your survival depends on it. It's no surprise that when we poll people in this country, it's Black Americans and Latino Americans who are by far the most concerned about climate change. The numbers are off the charts. It turns out, truthfully, remember what I told you about how I've always been told that environmentalism was something that rich white people did? It turns out really that pouring carbon into the air is something that rich white people do. And so we have to build a powerful, diverse environmental movement, which we've begun to do, I think, in significant and important ways. And I'm going to talk about one of the other axes of diversity that maybe we haven't thought about quite as much until Angie's terrific presentation. Because the other group that's been really good on climate change is young people. And again, for pretty obvious reasons, you know. I'm going to be dead before the very worst of all of this kicks in, but if you are a student here right now, it does not matter what class you're taking. If we don't get this right pretty soon, your job when you're my age is going to be disaster response, because that's going to be everybody's job, okay? And so it, again, concentrates the mind, and it is no wonder that it was young people who, except for me, started 350.org, and you know, we ran this big, continue to run this big campaign around the world to get institutions to divest their holdings in fossil fuel, and young people have run that. It's become the biggest anti-corporate, we're about $40 trillion now in endowments and portfolios that have divested from fossil fuel. And that's Harvard and Princeton and Oxford and Cambridge, but it's also 1,000 other schools, including the University of Michigan, which did it fairly early on, and that was a very big deal in that campaign, for which we're grateful. But it was young people who did that work, and when young people got out of, when they graduated, as is their want, when they got out, they wanted to keep working, so they formed something called the Sunrise Movement, these kids who had done divestment. And it was the Sunrise Movement that brought us the Green New Deal, and it was the Green New Deal that got us this IRA bill last year, because they'd laid the groundwork for it and demanded it and pushed for it. It came, as everything that goes through Congress does, came out somewhat misshapen on the other end, but at least there was something there to start with. And of course, there were lots of other young people doing amazing things all over the world. You all know about Greta Thunberg, and you should. And I adore her. She's one of my favorite people to work with in the whole world. And I always enjoy talking with her and working with her. But she would be the first person to tell you that there are 10,000 Greta Thunbergs around this planet. And I met a couple of them at dinner tonight. Remarkable young people leading the cause, and they have behind them, there were 10 million kids out on school strike in September of 2019 for Action on Climate before the pandemic kind of shut things down for a while. So young people are doing a great job, and as well they should. But I began to get a little tired, as I was telling these lifelong learning people earlier today. I began to get a little tired at a certain point of people explaining to me that it was up to the next generation to solve this problem. That seems highly unfair, and it also seems somewhat impractical, because young people have all the energy, all the intelligence, all the idealism, but they lack by themselves the structural power to make the change that we need to make in the time that we have. Okay? So this is a fun, as Angie said, this is a fun audience because it's pretty perfectly divided between two age demographics, you know. And it's the other age demographic that I want to talk to for a minute, okay? Because the people who have a lot of structural power are people with hairlines like mine, okay? If you're over the age of 60, there are 70 million of us in this country. And multiply that by some factor, because nobody has to encourage us to get out and vote. There is no known way to prevent old people from voting. Young people should be well aware of that. You better get out and vote, because you can be darn certain that everybody who looks like me is going to be out voting. So make sure you're too. Not only that, we ended up with most of the money. The baby boomers and the silent generation above them have 70% of the country's financial assets. So we should be a powerful tool if we can mobilize. People have said it can't work because people become more conservative as they age. Maybe a little true, you know, definitely get crotchetier as you age, you know. But look, if you're in your what we're calling third act, that's this new organization we've formed about a year ago. If you're over 60, if you're in your third act now, your first act was back in that moment of epic cultural, social, political transformation when the world changed, when we started taking women to be serious parts of public life, when the apex of the civil rights movement, the first Earth Day, on and on and on. I was telling people earlier today, if you have any doubts about this, look at what the Supreme Court went after when they went on their rampage last summer. They went after the Voting Rights Act of 1965, the Gun Control Act of 1968, the Clean Air Act of 1970, and Roe v. Wade 1973. That's what they're trying to undo. Okay, it was the stuff that we did when we were young and that we should now figure out how to defend. Defend in really straightforward ways. So that's what we've been doing. The third act we started a year ago. It's grown very, very fast. There's now tens of thousands of people around the country engaged in it. They've set up chapters and working groups and stuff hither and yon. Because among other things, one other thing old people have is some time that they might not have had before. And they have a lot of skills about how to put it to good use and things. So people have been doing all that, and it's been beautiful to watch. We kind of had our first big day of action just 2 weeks ago, and I'm going to tell you about it. We'd done a lot of organizing work around the elections and stuff a year ago, but the elections for the moment, we're in that brief, 3-month period when they allow us not to be in the middle of an election anymore. And so we used the time to go after the fossil fuel industry, in particular to go after the 4 big American banks, Chase, Citi, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, that are the 4 biggest funders of the fossil fuel industry. They've given them more than $1 trillion since we signed the Paris Climate Accords. They did not need Donald Trump to sabotage the Paris Climate Accords. Big banks were happy to do it by themselves for a percentage. And so we wanted to try and start bringing that to people's attention. So we had a big day of action all over the country. We had 100 demonstrations hither and yon, and they were beautiful and powerful. You know, up in Alaska, they made big credit cards out of wood and then cut them up with solar-powered chainsaws, you know. I was in Washington, D.C., where first thing to be said was the diversity of the new environmental movement was on display. The big rally we had, the speakers besides me were a woman named Ebony Martin, who's just taken over as the head of Greenpeace, the first African American to run that important institution, and she was followed directly by an old friend of mine, Ben Jealous, who's just taken over the Sierra Club, our biggest environmental organization, but who used to run the NAACP, and that marriage of the civil rights movement and the environmental movement is going to be a powerful, powerful thing, I would predict. So that was good. That diversity was on display. And then we leaned into the fact of being old, you know. We did a sit-in that shut down these 4 banks for the day. They just locked up. But we did the sit-in in rocking chairs in front of each one. And it was by far the most comfortable. I've taken part in more than my share of sit-ins. This was the first comfortable one ever, and it's the only way I'm doing it from now on, I tell you. And it was just beautiful to get to see people standing up for each other, generations working together in the ways that we need to work. I was telling people before that my least favorite bumper sticker in the whole world is the one you see sometimes on the back of people's Winnebagos or something. And it says, "I'm spending my kid's inheritance." It's like, ha, 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 you know. It's basically true in every sense of the word. That's what has been happening, and it's what has to stop. And people want it to stop, I think. I think when older people now start to think about their legacy, which, if you're 20, properly seems like a very abstract notion, doesn't seem quite so abstract when you find yourself nearer the exit than the entrance, you know. Your legacy is the world you leave behind for the people you love the most. And we're in danger of leaving behind a world that was worse than the one we found. So our job is to figure out how to go to work, not to lead everything. We do not need to lead everything. I think it's even possible that we should, I mean, much as I like President Biden, I think it's possible that, you know, maybe the better part of valor would be to say maybe somebody else. You know, there's... Not that we want to deprive you of your governor just yet, but, you know, that's definitely how the rest of us are thinking. But we got to be in this together. We did a demonstration a few months ago against these banks. It was in New York City, and we were marching between the different banks, Citibank, Chase, Wells, Bank of America. And there was, you know, hundreds of high school students there, because there's always high school students. They get this better than anybody else. And of course, they're somewhat sprier, so they were at the head of the march. But at the back of the march, there was a big bunch of us with a big banner that said, "Fossils against fossil fuels," you know. And so we were doing our best to bring what we could. That's what this fight is going to take. And the diversity is absolutely crucial to making it happen. So I am very grateful that you picked this topic for us tonight. I think it was just the right topic. And I thank you so much for doing it and for letting us be here. What a pleasure. Thank you. Angie, I think you're... I think Angie's coming up, and Pat, and maybe Emma. Or... So did the virtual PowerPoint work? You can see the pictures? Good. We're working on this. I mean, I've got the patent, so it's...
Does it work?
Testing, okay. Hi, my name is Emma Abedrabo. I'm a third-year environmental science major here at Saginaw Valley, and I'm the president of the Climate Stick Club here at Saginaw Valley. So, and Pat here is the founder of the lovely organization that we call home, and we will be facilitating this fireside chat with Angela and Bill tonight. We have the opportunity to ask them a few questions, hopefully ones that you were wondering as well. So.
And could you all hear that? Because it's difficult for me to hear it up here. So we have a series of questions that we have already put together, because in past experiences, sometimes the questions that came from the audience detracted from the whole thrust of the organization. So Emma has the first question, and believe me, it's quite a question.
So, climate activism has been a generational movement, but over time it seems that we've only made very small improvements. So given that you, Angela, work with the younger generation and that you, Bill, work with the older generation, is there anything that you've seen in your endeavors that you would consider to be like a light at the end of the tunnel for climate change, or not?
I mean, so the question is, are there things we can point to that are hopeful in this climate fight? Sure. I mean, so one of the things that's very hopeful is the thing we've already talked about, big movement building, because you have to have something to provide a kind of mode of energy to get things happening. The other thing, but that wouldn't be enough by itself. The other thing that was required was a lot of science and engineering. And the scientists and engineers have really come through. In the last decade, the price of renewable energy has dropped like a rock, dropped 90%. Sometime in the last 3 or 4 years, it crossed some invisible boundary where it became the cheapest power in the world. We live on a planet where the cheapest way to generate power is to point a sheet of glass at the sun, okay? That's important for a bunch of reasons. We haven't fully gotten it into our minds yet. We still call sun and wind alternative energy, as if it was kind of, I don't know, like the Whole Foods of energy or something. But in fact, it's the Sam's Club of energy. It is the cheap stuff, and if we get that through our minds, it'll be a big help. But if you want to understand why there's so much opposition to it from the fossil fuel industry and the politicians that they fund, that's the same answer. A world where people could count on the sun delivering their energy every morning when it rose above the horizon. If you're Exxon, that's the worst business model of all time, okay? You've gotten rich because for a century you've made people write you a check every month because they needed some more energy, So they do not want the sun delivering the energy for free, and they have enough money to game our political system in extraordinary ways to keep a lot of change from happening, okay? So it takes both these things. It takes that science and engineering, and then it takes that political organizing to give, to allow it to. 50 years from now, do not get me wrong, we're going to run the planet on sun and wind because it's going to be close to free. But if it takes us anything like 50 years to get there, then the planet we run on sun and wind will be a broken planet. Climate change, the essential physical fact of it is it's a timed test. Winning slowly is just a different way of losing on climate change. It's not like other political issues. As long as we've been alive, for instance, we've been debating, should we have national health care in America? I think it's a sin and a shame that we do not. I assume that eventually we'll join every other industrialized nation in having it. People will die and go bankrupt in the meantime, but it will not be harder to do it when we finally make up our minds to do it, you know? Climate change is not like that. Once you've melted the Arctic, nobody has a good plan for how you freeze it back up again, okay? And we've melted more than half of it already. So time is very short. That's why the urgency that Angie and I were both kind of projecting here, I think. And that's really what that climate stick demonstrates so powerfully, you know, just how little margin we have left.
And for me, I think it's that we have a generation that actually sees that urgency in a way that generations that came before didn't. And one of the things that has been so inspiring to me is this generation doesn't wait their turn. You know, we were raised in a sense that, you know, it's not your turn yet. You don't get to make the rules. You don't get to make the rules. And this generation, as I see them, they're running for office, they're gaining office, and they are coming in with ideas and bills and change in ways that we did not see before, so that they are still young and they are still not as bought by the oil companies that have owned a lot of our older politicians. And I think that seeing that they are ready to stand up and make the change now and not wait till it's their turn.
So my question is going to be first to Angela, and then a slightly different version to Bill. Angela, what was there in Bill's presentation that might have been new to you or more empowering for your work going forward?
Honestly, talking about the global day of action that you had, and not just the global day of action, but what happened with that young woman being turned away from the Intercontinental. That really struck a chord with me. And the face of power that woman showed. She didn't know what was going to happen when she asked that woman to take her phone. And she still did it because it's that important. And it's that kind of power, and it's that kind of fearlessness that this young generation has, and the people that are lower on an economic scale and people that are Black and brown and Asian are showing, that is going to make the change so that we don't have to have a world where the people who didn't make the problem are suffering daily because of those that did.
And my question for you, Bill, is that, you know, you were in the organizing young people game for several decades. Is there anything that you learned in there that you could easily transfer to Angela?
Angela knows just what she's doing. She needs no help from me. And I've gotten to watch Next Gen as it rose because the guy who started it, Tom Steyer, is an old friend of mine, but more importantly, the first director of it for many years was one of my former students, a guy named Ben Wessel, the national director of it, who was one of the best students I ever had, and a just fantastic activist. And he did, I will say, one of the things that they figured out early on was that it was going to be easier. I went on in 2016, Next Gen was organizing across Pennsylvania and Ohio to turn out the vote for Hillary Clinton in the election. So I went on for a couple of weeks to help them giving talks and stuff, but which I was marginally useful, but what was mainly useful was that Next Gen had figured out that if they wanted to register voters, they should pull up food trucks right next to where they were going to register them and make sure there was a lot of free food to be had. And, you know, I will say one of the few things that has not changed in the world since my days in college was the dramatic appeal of free food. It worked just as well. So these are, you know, organizing sounds like a high-minded, you know, bit, pretty much that, you know.
We'll still feed you. If you want to come volunteer with us, we will still feed you.
All right. Okay, so my next question is, if diversity brings strength to climate action, what would you two consider to be the biggest weakness in climate action? And what would be the best way for you to suggest turning that weakness into a strength?
I think, and Bill talked about it, the biggest thing that is working against climate action is the money that's involved with destroying the planet. That is the biggest hurdle that we have to overcome in climate action. And the only way you do that is by organizing. That's it, plain and simple.
That's exactly right. There's no use wishing it away. And, people always, we should get money out of politics, and we sure should, I'm a Vermonter. Bernie's an old friend of mine, he's absolutely right about that. Citizens United was a disgrace, but it's not going to go away on its own. And the only way to do any of this stuff is to organize. Now, my good dear friend, Reverend Lennox Yearwood, who runs the Hip Hop Caucus, he was at this talk in Washington, this rally in Washington the other day too, because we've gone to jail together many, many, many times. And he gave a talk, and he said at the end, he's a very hopeful guy, more hopeful than me sometimes. And he said, organized people beat organized money every time. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not sure about the every time, but I am sure that it's possible, because we've done some of it, and we've won. I mean, when you fight, you sometimes win, So that's a huge part of it. But that organized people have to look like the whole country, and that makes it stronger and stronger and stronger all the time. And it also makes it, and this is really good, makes it way more fun. Organizing, it can be hard work and sometimes discouraging work, and people will not stick with it if it's not also emotionally rewarding. At its best, it's nothing more emotionally rewarding than that feeling of working together with other people to get something done. I'm rambling, but let me just say it in one more way. The 20th century gave us it's going to turn out, when historians think about it, two great technologies. One of them was the solar panel, and the other is the nonviolent social movement, which was a technology invented on the margins. Gandhi and the suffragists and Dr. King, whose birthday we celebrate because Stevie Wonder made us celebrate his birthday, one of the great political organizing victories of all time. They invented this technology that allowed the small and the many to stand up to the mighty and the few. But it takes a lot of work. Occasionally that work is dramatic, civil disobedience. Usually it's Facebooking and petition signing and phone banking and on and on and on. It's all work, but it's all beautiful, joyful work if it's done in the right spirit and with the right, with a really diverse and beautiful group of people, which, like the one we have tonight.
And one of the things I really love to talk to people and encourage them, I talked it a little bit out on stage, find something locally. Because one of the things that gets that spirit and that joy is victory. And you can make a change locally much easier, much faster than you can do it on a federal or a global scale. So I highly encourage you, find out what your local elected officials do, show up to those meetings, get your friends together for a cause, because you will get a victory that will fuel you to get bigger victories.
And then, once you've done that, which is absolutely right, figure out a way to plug into organizations that are big enough to allow you to also have a voice on a national and a global scale. That's why we set up things like Third Act or 350, because we're not going to solve climate change. we're not even going to come close to solving climate change one small thing at a time. We're up against it now, and we're going to need big, big shifts that can only come when we also figure out how to pull together. So those are the two sides of that very important coin.
So Angela, my next question comes out of my organizing background. I want you to tell the young people in this audience what are the 3 things that they should do tomorrow or next week that moves them towards supporting you in the Next Gen America's activity.
First thing you do, did you sign those sheets?
clipboard.
Did you sign those sheets? If you didn't sign those sheets, make sure you sign those. Next week, we have go to nextgen.com, and you can sign up on our Mobilize to be able to talk to your local politicians about climate-friendly legislation. And third, when I call or text you, answer. And then it'll be super secret instructions on your next piece.
So for Bill, it's a little more complicated question. The climate stick, which I've been working on since you wrote the article in 2012, came to me because the Methodist minister that you work with in Ann Arbor moved to Essexville, where I grew up. And he invited me to a Sunday school class to explain climate change to them. And at that time, I had 72 slides that I went around helping people fight the 3rd coal plant that was supposed to be built in Essexville, Michigan. And I had learned way too much about all the things associated with climate change, and I still didn't know enough. People could always ask me questions that I could not answer. And I have a chart with about 7 arrows pointing at me with all the questions that could come at any one time. And I said, even when people went through a slideshow with 72 explaining all this stuff at the end, well, they were glad they knew something about it, but I knew it was not going to motivate them to do much because, frankly, it didn't motivate me to do much either. But when I was invited to that Sunday school class, I got out a piece of 2x4, I put black marks on it, green marks on it, which eventually became the climate stick. And when I showed the kids in the Sunday school class, they got it. Then I was invited to a county commission meeting. I couldn't take old white stick, so I painted up with the colors of the stop or a traffic light with black for the fossil fuels. And I had a 6-foot climate stick, which was a pain to carry around, and a person in this audience said to me, if you make it into a pendant, I'll wear it. Now my point, and I'm going to get to the question, is that shows you how some insignificant events can eventually lead to lots of things. More than 30,000 climate sticks have been distributed. It's only because the work that you did, but wait, it's not the work that you did. There were thousands of engineers and scientists who put together what was in that article, and there were dozens of people who interacted with me to make the climate stick. So in the histories that were shown to us or told to us in the class this morning, you saw so much tremendous energy and intellect that was there. So the question to you is, when you know all of that, and you know what the challenge really is for us to get through the next 6 years, how do you deal with that? I mean, I've seen 2,100 people clap for you when you got the award in Ann Arbor, okay? And so there's a great deal of positive response you get, but you probably know more than most of us how difficult it's going to be to get through to the other side. How do you deal with that?
Well, in certain ways, climate is a fraught issue. We're talking about the scariest thing that our species has ever managed to do. And especially if you have kids or grandkids, or young people that you love, it really is emotionally scary sometimes. Maybe a little easier for me because I've had such a long time to deal with it, more or less my whole life, And so I've worked through some of the emotion, and because I've had the great outlet of being able to organize, which is the only antidote, I think, to that kind of anxiety and despair. But I'm also a writer. So part of my way of dealing with this is to constantly be on the lookout for new images, new ways of thinking about this that help other people through it. The one that really captivates my mind at the moment, that builds on what I was saying about these stark and remarkable decreases in the cost of renewable energy, is that, and for me anyway, this is very exciting, that humans are right at the edge of being able to end our 700,000-year-old habit of setting things on fire. Worked well for us. You know, when we learned to make fire, we were able to cook food, and we got a big brain as a result. We could move north and south from the equator. The anthropologists say that some of the social bonds of our species come from all those nights around the campfire. When we learned to control the combustion of coal and gas and oil, it made us rich and got us modernity with the Industrial Revolution. But now it comes at a big cost, not only the existential risk of climate change, but also the 9 million deaths a year, 1 death in 5 on our planet, that comes from people breathing the particulates that are produced when we burn stuff. And third, the very large cost of the fact that as long as we depend on a resource that's only available in a few places, the people who live on top of those places will have way more power than they should. Think Vladimir Putin, able to invade Ukraine entirely because of the wealth he's gained from oil and gas. So to me, it's extremely exciting that we're now at the moment, this may be the Methodist Sunday school teacher in me, when we can take full advantage of the fact that the good Lord was kind enough to hang a large ball of burning gas 93 million miles away. We can catch its rays on a sheet of glass. We can take advantage of the fact that it differentially heats the earth and produces the wind that drives those gorgeous turbines as they turn. That's Hogwarts scale magic, you know? And if we were smart, that would be the thing that we would be absolutely concentrated, fixated on this planet right now, is figuring out just how fast we can spread that as far and wide as possible, because then we'd be in a world where people wouldn't need to be getting asthma. Then we'd be in a world where nobody would have to bow a knee to Putin or the king of Saudi Arabia or the Koch brothers, who are our biggest oil and gas barons. Then we'd be in a world where, 20-year-olds would not be wondering whether it's okay for them to have kids or not, because what kind of world are they going to live in? It's not like the world that run on sun and wind would be a utopia. I doubt we're ever going to have a utopia. There'll be different problems, they'll come with them, but they won't be those problems, and they won't be on the scale of those problems, because this is the biggest problem that we've ever come up against, and by a large margin.
So I believe Emma and I have exhausted our questions.
We may have exhausted your audience, too.
I apologize for that. We're going to have one more speaker. I thought I saw Diva go up the stairs. So she will come out to say goodbye, and I express your attitude.
Want me to go get her?
She's there. Diva. Sorry.
There you are.
Well, hi everyone, I'm Diva Patel, and I just want to thank you all so much for coming to this event. I also wanted to take a moment to thank the sponsors of this event. That would be the Dow Visiting Scholars and Artists Series here at SVSU, SVSU's Office of Diversity Programs, Academic Affairs, and the College of Science, Engineering, and Technology. I also want to give a huge thank you to the SVSU Climate Stick Club and Pat Race for organizing this event. And lastly, to our two speakers, Bill and Angela. I really hope that you all take the information that we learned today and become active citizens in combating climate change, and really to bring diversity to the cause. So thank you all so much for coming, and I hope you all have a great evening.
Very good work.
All right.
Such good work.
Also, there are refreshments outside.